Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Year of the Demons. Now, this month we were reviewing a movie called The Sect. And full disclosure, I actually already filmed this review, went to go edit it, and I found out that only a minute of my 20-minute review actually recorded. So, I'm going to make this as quick as possible for the sake of my own editing. Because I know you guys are just clamoring to get this out on time each month. Right? So The Sect. Now, The Sect is also known as Demons 4 or The Devil's Daughter. It's rarely called Demons 4. It was just marketed as that in like one territory. But Devil's Daughter and The Sect I've seen like used pretty much interchangeable amount of times. It was released in 1991, directed by, let's see if I got this time, Michele, Soavi, same director as The Church, and his name actually even pops up again on a later Demon sequel. And it was also produced by Dario Argento, who's been like the driving force behind all of these demon movies. Now, I'm just going to start off with a disclaimer that there's not a single demon in this movie. Not even like a monster. It's just another unrelated sequel. This movie's actually about a cult instead, which, you know, actually kind of works for the movie, I want to say, because it really does feel unique in its own right, and we'll get to that in a moment. But this was, yeah, the follow-up to The Church that Michele was making. It's a little bit more claustrophobic than the other one, and it wasn't quite as well received. But it does have its own following in its own right, so I definitely would recommend this movie, and you're about to hear, hopefully in only 2 minutes, why I believe you should watch this movie. Alright, so let's get to the plot of this movie. Starts in like the 1970s, early 1970s I want to say, and there's this Charles Manson looking guy, played by the same lead actor as The Church, and he just shows up against all these like hippies at this really picturesque like field and meadow thing, and yeah, he just kind of brings his bikers friends to just butcher them all. And most of it's seen off camera, so you don't really get to see like this ultra violence, but again, I think it kind of works for the movie. It really kind of like allows the tension to kind of build because it doesn't quite show you the graphic gore right away, but it kind of like alludes to it. Now, they quickly show that graphic gore when they fast forward to the 90s, and they show one of the cult members killing a girl. Don't really remember why, don't think it really explains it. And he kills her, which, you know, is a little gruesome. She actually drops some milk, mixes with her blood. Very unsettling. Never thought I would picture that image before. But he then takes out her heart, apparently, because while he's on the subway, he accidentally drops it, and everyone freaks out. And while he is trying to run away, the cops find him, put a gun to his head, so he then promptly takes that gun, sticks it in his mouth, blows off the back of his head. There's that intense gore you're looking for. Again, it's not like the Demons 1 and 2, like, over-the-top kind of stuff. It's, like, really, like, kind of moving violence. I don't know if you would, I guess you could say that violence is pretty impactful in this movie. And they use it sparingly, but when they do show it, it gets pretty intense. And I think that's definitely like one of the strengths of this movie, because it really feels like the passion behind all this. You feel the tension building up, the terror that the main heroine is experiencing. And I'll get to why in a moment, because I still have not explained the plot entirely. What happens is, someone who we find out later is kind of like one of the leaders of the cult. His name is Mebius, played by a famous actor named Herbert Lom. You guys might not know him. He played as Chief Inspector Dreyfus in the original Pink Panther movies. Hilarious guy, great actor, and he does a very good job at being intimidating but also frail at the same time. And he almost gets hit by a car by Kelly Curtis. Now, Kelly Curtis is that's the actress's name, not the character's name. Because Kelly Curtis is the actual sister of Jamie Lee Curtis. So that's kind of interesting. She's not really in a lot more, and you can see that her acting chops were there, but not quite at the level that she needed to be to reach this whole stardom. I wish she had more like opportunities, because according to her filmography, she really wasn't in too much stuff, which is kind of a shame. But again, second time I digressed in this video. So, after he almost she almost hits him with a car, she takes him back and is kind of like just watching over him, make sure he's okay. And while she's asleep, she gets a bug stuck up her nose by good old Herbert Lom, which is a little disturbing. And then it follows up was he like kind of drops this package that he's had the entire movie down like this weird like sewer grate underneath her house. I'm not really sure. And then weird things start to happen. Can't really explain it without getting a little spoilery. That's a word. Don't look it up. And in it, I would say that it has just some of the best imagery I've seen in these Italian movies so far. While the first Demons 1 and 2 were kind of just like shock value kind of thing, this is a much more like thinking horror film. You really get to kind of experience actual like fear in this movie. Now, I wasn't actually fearful while watching this movie. I was like, busy writing my notes. But I would say that it can kind of, it has like that kind of fear quality to it that most horror movies don't have. And I think it's because of Michele Soavi's great directing behind the camera, because he came up with such vivid imagery that it creates this amazing atmosphere for the movie that just kind of like puts you in her shoes, and you can kind of like, as I said before, feel the terror in this. Now, there's also like a good theme going on was like water, and in it like water seems to like be one of like the life essences. They see it all the time. You sometimes only hear it trickling, and they also like counteract that with huge explosions every now and then. So it is water and fire, and it's a really nice, like, subtle imagery going on was the battle between the two elements. One other thing that I actually really liked about this movie that I think lends itself to giving it this, like, atmospheric quality is that sometimes the music just stops. And all you are left to deal with is what you see on the camera, but also the sound design. So all of the sound is what's giving you the fear, and they don't even rely on music at all. And honestly, I think it's more effective that way. So that's definitely something where it's kind of like less is more, which is, Italian cinema doesn't really follow that too much, but when they do, they nailed it. Now, I wouldn't really say there's bad things about this movie, but there are 3 things that I wasn't a huge fan of in this movie. First off, some of the acting by the non-leads are a little hit or miss. Very stale, especially from like the hippies in the opening. Now, what I would say the biggest thing is the Charles Manson looking like cult leader at the beginning. Now, it's different than Moebius that you see later, played by Herbert Lom. He's played by Thomas Arness, as I said, who played in The Church. Now, this guy, his name Damon, he is a great character, but he's not the main villain. And he's the main character in the opening, but then you don't see him for a large portion of the movie, and then all of a sudden he does come back and he's very important to the story, but he's not the main villain, and it kind of feels like he should have been. Now, this isn't a hit against Herbert Lom's character, Moebius, who is a great villain in this movie, but it just seems like he should have been more, and he wasn't. And lastly, this is, I guess, a little bit of a nitpick, because I prefer really dark endings. I'm not going to spoil anything for you guys, but the ending is very impactful, but then they kind of like backpedal it a bit, and maybe it's just because they want a little bit happier of an ending, but if they would have just ended with this like a gut-wrenching ending, that I would have absolutely adored it, but sadly they went for, I wouldn't call it a cop-out. It makes more sense thematically, but I wish it was just darker. And kill-wise, I already talked about some of them, like with the girl getting stabbed, the family getting massacred at the intro. There's not like things that really stand out, except for one. And besides like all these stabbings, people exploding in cars, this one kill was, they drug a girl like the cult does, and they put a bunch of hooks all around her head, flip her upside down, and then Damon grabs the hooks, twists it and pulls, and her face comes right off, and it is great. I don't think I can find a picture of the actual face coming off, but the image of the hooks in her body, oh, it is frightening, and I love it, so hopefully you guys do too. Now, lastly, I guess I would just say, like, the verdict of this movie, I love it. It was not a movie I expected to love. I thought it was just going to be another kind of crappy sequel like The Omen, not The Omen, why did I say The Omen? No, The Ogre was. But it kind of gave me something different I wasn't expecting. It didn't feel like a Demons movie, because it's not. And Michele Soavi is one great director who really knows like how to tap into the fear that you can portray through film. And I definitely recommend this movie for anyone. It's kind of a slasher movie, kind of a cult movie. It's a little bit of everything. It has some of the Italian sensibilities, but overall it's a very good movie that I recommend to everyone who is a fan of late 80s, early 90s horror movies. I know that's kind of not that sacred of a ground for horror fans, but there's some gems in it, and I think this is one of them. So definitely give it a look. And that pretty much does it with a review. Hopefully I kept it a little bit shorter than my other failed attempt was. Now next month we're going to be reviewing Demons 5, which really doesn't have an American title, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Italian title now because you guys have to tune in next month to hear me butcher that.